Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Advocata's Reset Now podcast. I'm Anuka Ratnayake, your host for the day, and with me I have our guest speaker, Dr. Sujata Gamage. Dr. Gamage is an advisor to the Advocata Institute and also a senior research fellow at Learn Asia, a regional think tank based in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Dr. Gamage specializes in planning, evaluation, and capacity building in education. Her research interests includes evaluation in ICT, use in schools in Sri Lanka, ICT for development and education in universities in Asia and the Pacific region. Welcome on board, Doctor. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Sure.
Discussing about reforms, we know that Sri Lanka is in the track of reforms and also is planning on a reform agenda. So, at Advocata Institute, we thought it would be interesting to discuss about the education sector reforms. So also, Doctor, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a lot of discussion around education sector reforms and also a lot of shifts within the education system. We saw from the traditional education system, we moved to an online-based education system, and also distance learning became the new normal. And we've also discussed the challenges and the new trends that Sri Lanka will have to face and was facing during the pandemic. And at that time, we were able to discuss about the reforms that needs to be implemented within our education system. So if I would like to bring up the question of how would you evaluate the progress that we've made with those reforms, how would you approach to this question?
Yes, schools were closed for COVID, I think March 2020. And, um, and it was only in November 2021 that our Minister of Education put out abbreviated lesson plans for students, because when COVID happened, our curriculum is really extensive. There's really too much content. And if you take Bhutan, by June, they had announced and published, shared with the teachers, an abbreviated curriculum for emergencies. We never got around it. Our teachers just scrambled and did what they can. The ministry can take no credit for any of the distant learning that happened during COVID. That is a fact. One thing that happened was the National Institute of Education. There was a very active director general at that time. He got some videos going on. And then so there were this, I think they were broadcast by about end of March, they had them on. But videos don't make education. It has to be linked to a teacher. Unless the teacher tells you there's a test at the end of it or I'm questioning you, kids are not going to watch that. So everything that our response to COVID during the epidemic was really totally ad hoc, all done by teachers, and it really showed that our education system is really decentralized when in its really implementation. The center did nothing. So, and to date, we don't know how many children left school because of that. What is the learning loss? We don't know. Even now, today, we don't have school census. It's not there. How many children have lost school, have dropped out due to the, now pandemic is gone, now due to the economic crisis, we don't know. So I think we really have not talked, just before we talk about reforms, we need to know where we are. We don't even know that. So I don't think we cannot be at all happy about what our center is doing for education.
Yeah, okay. I do agree with you, doctor, because even during the economic crisis, we discuss about the education reforms because we did not step up our game even after the pandemic, even after understanding there are so many loopholes within the system. Also, with the pandemic, there was a discussion around digitalization of education and also improving the education infrastructure. How do you visualize this? How do you see this as a part of education sector reforms?
You mean the ICT infrastructure?
Yes.
Yes. It's it's a favorite subject. Everybody loves to, say, donate computers to school, and they're great photo opportunities. But I think we put too much emphasis on the infrastructure. I think we need to talk about the outcomes we expect. Then you can work backwards. I would say if I were to, say what we need to do about ICT in education is to define some standard. Every child should have a chance to use ICT in education at least 4 hours a month, 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week. Then you let the schools decide what do they need for that. Some schools have good ICT labs. So I know every once a week the children get to go to the ICT lab and do their lesson there. So because there's so many different types of schools, one solution does not fit everything. So we are always focusing on infrastructure because it's the easiest to do. Then you can say, we did so many computer schools, so many computer labs, but they don't work. Most of the time you add to e-waste. So I think the best is to focus on outcomes and get the provinces. There are 9 provinces. Tell you this is what we want to do. You give us a budget, and each school has to decide. Some schools you don't need to have your own lab. Maybe once a week you bus the children to a nearby school. But just get the outcome you want, and then let the schools decide how they do that. Otherwise, if we talk about infrastructure, we are never going to get our schools fully equipped.
Right. So, which also means that the infrastructure is already there, but also our school system is not getting the maximum use of the available infrastructure. Yes.
Absolutely. I think if you count the number of computers that have been distributed, maybe 3 times over for each student.
Yes.
So, but the thing is, we can't, some of them have trouble because of, repairs and everything, but forget about those. Give the basic minimum targets for schools, and then they will, rise up to the occasion.
Yes, that is a very important point that you brought up. And also, while we were talking about ICT education and also what we need to do with the available infrastructure, I would like to direct a question on you about the curriculum, the school curriculum, how it needs to be improved. And what are the loopholes? And when we're talking about education sector reforms in 2023, what are the areas that we need to look into in terms of education curriculum?
This education reform package, it's been birthed. It's a long labor process. I don't think they're looking at huge, big changes. We just can't do that, and particularly after this, last 12 months or last 9 months. Because our education budget is, it's, I think total comes to about, I think I have the 2021, only 2020, 250 billion. I think I did not count the 2023, but because the education budget is very difficult to evaluate, because part of the education budget is sent through the provincial Minister of Provinces. So, but anyway, whatever the budget we have, it's about 50% of what we should have because of inflation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've just seen the National Education Commission's national policy document. Not a word about the economic crisis, right? So we really need to. We can't do huge reforms, but actually, if you take the existing curriculum, it was. I think it was done only updated about 3 years ago. I think that curriculum is fine. Just take things out.
Yes.
Just taking things out, because you can have you have learning outcomes. There are about hundreds and hundreds of learning outcomes. You can identify essential learning outcomes.
Yeah.
This is if we did not do it for COVID, we need to do it for the economic crisis. People just have not get it into their heads that there is a crisis. You look at the documents, National Education Commission reports, the ministry talking about introducing AI. I mean, not a word about, how do we do the regular programming for students under the economic crisis. Yes. So I think we can work with the existing curriculum, and just by reducing and identify what you call essential learning outcomes. We don't need actually that will cut down. There are no exercise books. Actually, what children are doing is really copying what's in the textbooks into the exercise books. So we can reduce the need for exercise books by half by changing the way we teach. So I think reforms, big talks have. I don't think this reform package is never going to come out because it's just too much of a big change, too many changes. We can work with the existing curriculum.
Okay, yes. As you said, there are very important issues like not having enough paper and the shortage of stationery. We've been talking about it and it is being discussed at the parliament as well. And with that, we also see it is a threat to the students. They'll not have enough supplies. And like that, what are the other issues you see coming up with the economic crisis and will affect the education sector?
Nutrition, of course, school lunches. They used to give only 30 rupees per student, and the schools stopped doing that. Usually it's sent to the schools, and the School Development Society gets the things, and the parents contribute, and they give the lunches. I think it's been topped up, but still it's not enough. I think we need a massive effort to pull together charity for this work. There's already actually my colleague Tara is really spearheading an experiment in getting support contributions, but I think they are also developing a website now with each school listed there, but under each school will be under the zonal director's supervision. So you can find your school. I mean, if your original hometown is somewhere else, you can decide to support that school. You can go and pick that school. But we need so many children are falling through the cracks. There's a lot of donations, a lot of charitable work. I think FAO is giving some money, some supplies, but not a single child should fall through the cracks. So we need a good online portal to capture all the schools and know where the support is going and where it's not. So the government, I don't think they can't, they won't be able to get that together. I think there's a civil society effort, and I think by about next week we should have that website up, I think.
Right. That's
We need a massive effort. Every child should be counted for.
okay. That's great news. And also, like you spoke about the nutritional aspect. When we talk about children and education, we cannot forget nutrition. And we know with the crisis, the impact of the crisis is being felt through the increase in food prices. And nutrition is an aspect that we all need to focus on. So with the allocations given on education and with whatever is being discussed for children's nutrition, do you think that we've taken enough efforts in the past few years to improve nutrition among the school students?
Um, the school lunches, actually, nutrition should be, it's part of the curriculum, how you should, what they should eat. It's just like, you learn that to write exam papers. There is a beautiful curriculum. Actually, we have a really good curriculum when you look at it from primary to the 8, 9, 10, 11. All that is weaved into the curriculum. Unfortunately, children just learn them blindly to write exams. As they have school lunch, they can always look at there's so much science, so much nutrition. They can, evaluate what they're eating. So it's all should be weaved into their daily life, nutrition education. But I think more than nutrition, what the allocation for schools, of course, there isn't enough. But I think we are not really distributing it in the right way. It should be a progressive distribution. In taxation, we say progressive taxation is when you tax the low income earners less, and progressively you increase the tax on the higher income. Same way, we should do that for schools. Right now, schools are funded per student. Royal College, we are very equitable. We are not equitable, we equal. We fund equally, but it's not equitable. So what you do is, you fund 8 per student. Royal College gets a certain amount. Say for electricity, by that count, they get about 30,000 rupees. But the actual electricity bill is about 600,000, right? So that's all met by the school development societies. But what we need is a progressive funding. That is, schools with the low income areas, they should get more funding per student, and then progressively less for the other schools. So no, funding is not distributed adequately, and we need to really have affirmative funding for low-income schools.
Yes. Yeah. Agree with that, Doctor. A very insightful discussion on nutrition and allocation of the education budget there. And I would also like to discuss with you about, since we discussed on the education curriculum, there's a discussion about the importance of STEM education being a part of our curriculum and how importantly it can affect our economy and the economic growth per se. What is your opinion on this?
STEM is, the latest buzzword is AI. You know, STEM is now we're all done. We've talked about it enough, that's done. So the latest is AI. I think it's another buzzword, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math in education. There's a really big misunderstanding about STEM. STEM is not about having more STEM graduates, more STEM students, more STEM uh, children sitting for more STEM subjects. STEM is about STEM concepts in their overall education. You know, in as I said, when they eat, you know, there's so much science to that. And if you take the grades 8 to 11, 8 to 9, no, 6 to 9 curriculum, it's amazing. There are geography. When you take geography, there's so much STEM there, you know. So it should be, actually, if you take the textbook, STEM is weaved into those. You can see that. It's not a big new thing. It's just that the teachers are not doing those practicals as they should. So there's a lot of practicals where it could be citizenship, it could be practical and technical skills, it could be in the sports curriculum, the health and physical education curriculum. There's so much science there. So it's about, you know, everywhere, you know, they are using, it's not only just STEM, it should be STEAM, you know, science, technology, arts, and engineering and math. Design should be, it's there. You know, they should, when you submit a paper, sometimes I find you submit a paper, first page is there, and the second page has only 2 lines. I mean, that's really, children should learn to pay attention to that, you know, how you lay out when you do something. So you don't have to have STEM is a buzzword. I think it's already there. What we need to do is to have what the education we have now to really make it activity based as it is intended, as it is intended. So that really requires us changing the exams, and I think reforms, I don't think we need to do anything, we just need to change the exams, just take some of the exams out. Right. And then, you know, without the pressure of exams, the teachers have time to do all the practicals, all the activities in the textbooks. The textbooks have all the activities. STEM is weaved into those.
Yes.
It's just a, you know, big, just some people to talk about, just, you know, throw about words, big words.
Right. Also, Doctor, even though that it seems like a password, and like you said, there is a myth about it. But also, the problem of having too many arts graduates has been highlighted, and the job market cannot facilitate jobs for art graduates. What is your opinion on this? How do we rectify this mistake? And we are also looking forward for an export-oriented economy. So, don't you think that technology is an important aspect that needs to be included in both secondary and tertiary education?
But you know, political science and sociology, these are very important subjects, right? It's just our students are doing Buddhist civilization and logic and some selected subjects. So I think the fix is at the end. You end the fix the end. That is in the universities. The universities are right now, you know, they just sit there and the students are brought to them. So they set aside, okay, we'll have this social department, we'll have political science, we'll have Buddhist civilization, and there's no market, it doesn't match the market. So what we need is to get the universities to get students to, to compete for students. Right now, you know, there's no, okay, so Java, but they get so many students. No, students have to apply. And it should be each university has to compete for students. So we need to change the university admission system, and then some of these things where there's no demand will go down. And of course, some of the even if there's a demand, the funding, the government funding should be for focused areas, And university, I think university admissions, we need to really limit it to more research-based admissions. Right now, we are trying to increase the number of graduates, just paper qualifications. We need to increase the number of graduates with, research, quality graduates. So we need to reduce the government openings. Because right now the funding is, we are spending too much on, relatively too much on higher education compared to school education. I would double the school education budget, reduce the higher education budgets, reduce the, make it more demand driven. And then, the students have they don't have places to apply for, they look for other options. So we need to fix the end, you know, then right now, as long as there are openings in the universities, students will choose those tracks.
Yes, as you
So
very
begin
correctly
with the end.
Yes. As you very correctly brought up, there is a problem of resource availability, and with the economic crisis, the resource scarcity will obviously be a problem. So, how do you think that the government and the relevant authorities need to address the lack of resources, especially when it comes to allocations and money into the education budget, both secondary and tertiary, like you mentioned?
Yeah, we really need to look at the budget. And there's a 2003 study by World Bank. It showed that in the region, we actually owe our percentage we spend on school education is much less than what it should be when you take the overall education budget. I know that's very interesting. This is a book by Dr. N.M. Pera, The Case for Free Education, published in 1944. And he really said, when we said education shall be free from kindergarten to university, he said, have you budgeted that? Because they did not budget that, right? So we continue to do that, and what's been happening is, because there's a huge demand for the noise that comes from the higher education sector, and we've been increasing we're increasing the number of places in universities, there's a knock-on effect on school education, right? Relative percent we spend on school education has been decreasing if you take the full education budget. So I think we need to go back to the 1944. And what he says is start with education up to 14 and make sure that is quality for everybody. So our goal should be all children completing 16 years of education. Right now we have pass rate of 60%, but we should say everybody should have minimum standard. That should be our goal. The rest of it actually, economic crisis, maybe sometimes you can't get higher education at this time. But our priority, I think we need to go back to where we were. The first mistake we made, it's somebody, I think, economist Joan Robinson said, in Sri Lanka, we are picking the fruits before the fruit is mature. That's what we did in 1944. We need to go back to that. We need to triple the education budget. And the rest, I don't know. We'll do what we can. But we need to increase the budget for school education.
Understood. So, as you very correctly brought up about the free education system, isn't the free education system going to face a major challenge with the economic crisis?
Absolutely. That's why we need to pick the most vulnerable and the more essential. Essential is we give every child, I think, 18 years of education, but maybe right now we will say 16 years. But we need to make sure that all the children, not a single one, should be left out. We should have minimum math, language, English. We need to give it to them. So that should be our focus. And if some of the universities have to charge fees, it's difficult for everybody, but we need to prioritize, and the priority should be school education. Because school education, if you look at economics, if you take the economics of it, the benefits, the public benefits are 100%. When you take higher education, there are more private benefits, right? So I think I don't think it's going to happen. It takes bold leadership. I don't see that coming here, but we'll just try to write this. No, this is going to be for another 10 years, this crisis. So we really need to prioritize, and the priority should be school education, school education, school education, and make sure every child, we don't leave out any child.
So, as you mentioned, Doctor, it is very important that we understand that we have to prioritize our school education given the economic crisis and the challenges that we are facing as a nation. It was a very fruitful discussion about you on the education sector reforms that we need to look into, with a reform agenda being discussed throughout the country and among all the policymakers. And also, it is important that we understand which track that our reforms and also our education sector needs to head towards in the near future, and also look beyond the near future and look towards a future prosperity in the education sector. Thank you very much, Dr. Gamage. And that brings us to the end of the episode today. And thank you for joining us, and hoping to see you all again on the Reset Now podcast.
You can listen to this podcast on Anchor, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember to follow us on all our social media platforms for more exciting content. See you in the next episode.